Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of thecinematropolis.com, your home to thoughtful conversations on film. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and today we are kicking off our reviews for 2026 movies with a review of The Bone Temple 28 years later. We are going into the zombie apocalypse, and we're going to, as always, start things with an icebreaker question before jumping into a spoiler-free review of the film, and then we'll close out the show with a spoiler-filled discussion. Joining me today, as always, he has, in fact, survived for over 28 years the zombie infection apocalypse. In fact, not only has he survived, I think he's got a T-shirt dedicated to it. LaRon Chapman, my co-host and award-winning Oklahoma filmmaker, welcome back to the show. Congrats on surviving another 28 years.
Thank you. I don't know if I'll survive another 28, but I'm here. I'm here now and thankful to be here. And man, remember when January was like dump month for movies?
Yeah.
Guys, there's a new time is coming, guys. A new time is coming, and I'm very thankful for it. Very thankful for it.
The universe in Hollywood, the movie guys, just heard you complaining about Wolfman last year, and they said we gotta make good on this somehow. We've got to have a great genre film in January. Thank the gods of the Bone Temple. Rejoining us from our 28 years later review, he comes to us from Adam Reviews Movies on TikTok. He also recently just launched a new movie website a few months ago. Let him talk about Adam Courtliff. Adam, welcome back to the show.
Hello. Pleasure to be back. Great to see you both.
So I see that you did not take 28 years to launch the movie website. Congrats on that. Tell us a little bit more. Obviously, you have your channel for TikTok, but tell us a little more about your website.
Yeah, so I thought, what better way to go from video to written format? It's something I wanted to do for a long time, but never actually had the sort of freedom to do it. But late last year, I thought if I go in head first, just see how it goes, see how it takes off, and it has. So if you're interested in long form content rather than just bite-sized TikToks, that's where I post my full reviews.
Great stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Adam is everywhere. TikTok, Letterboxd, and now on his own website. Again, check out the show notes for the link there. Adam, congrats on the success, and congratulations on surviving long enough to get to our follow-up to 28 years later with the Bone Temple. It seems just like yesterday that we were having our first podcast, and you were kind of like blowing me and LaRon away with some knowledge and some UK context here. And I'm glad that we are all still here for another review of the anticipated follow-up 28 years later. Rounding out the cast, she is a filmmaker in Oklahoma, also incredibly movie savvy, especially with the zombies. Jada Merritt. Jada, welcome back to the show.
It is I, a woman. And I am. It is such a great time to be a zombie like genre geek right now. Like, we're getting heavy hitters on all fronts. Yeah. I really love it.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy. Like, there was the zombies. I mean, zombies were around for a while, and then there was a huge boom because of like The Walking Dead and Nazi zombies and Call of Duty in like the late aughts, early 2010s. And then I think people, myself included, got just so tired of them, and I feel like we're back on a resurgence in a lot of ways, which is exciting because the resurgence is fueled by new creativity, at least from what I can tell. So, Jada, so glad to welcome you to the conversation on the zombies. Really looking forward to hearing what you think of this film. Now, before we get to the review and the icebreaker, a few different programming notes I want to share with listeners. So, as many of you know, we have recently shifted to YouTube. This is sort of an outcome of me, Caleb, your host, moving to Seattle, and LaRon living still in Oklahoma City. And we are committed to continuing these deep dive review conversations for new releases. We kind of just jumped into it really fast. I kind of moved and was like, hey, let's get back to movie reviews as quickly as possible. And we have been putting them on YouTube. And frankly, considering the bandwidth, I'm actually pretty proud of what we've put out so far on YouTube and Instagram. However, we're going to take a little bit of a pause for a few different reasons. Number one, due to my move, if I'm being honest as your producer, I've been in a perpetual state of catch-up for about 3 months now. Thank you all for your patience. That includes listeners, but also the people who have joined me on the microphone. Number two, I have been calling the video component like version 5.5. Like it's not even like a thing I would be proud of to say this is our first version of video. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to actually work on trying to get our video content a little more polished, which should hopefully make a better experience for everyone who's watching. We are going to be walking away or taking a break from these roundtable conversations like you're watching right now for about the next 6 or so weeks. We're going to be back with our review of, frankly, maybe the most hyped episode of this podcast ever. There's the review of Scream 7. That movie, of course, comes out the last weekend in February. We're going to be publishing our review on Wednesday, March 4th. Now, in the meantime, we are still going to be providing reviews. You're going to be getting, a few of you may remember while I was sort of in the interim of the move, both Laura and I did a couple of short little talk to the camera, talk to our phone reviews. And those will still be coming. So stay tuned to, of course, Instagram and YouTube. But we'll also be dropping the audio for those in the RSS feed for podcast listeners. So there'll be a lot shorter reviews and just sort of like, intimate time with me or intimate time with LaRon with our takes on movies. Because there are several movies that are coming out between now and Scream 7. We got like Wuthering Heights, I know is one that's much anticipated. Valentine's Day, I think is going to be a fun weekend at the theater. So again, you are still going to be getting reviews. They'll just be a little different than our regular roundtable reviews. So the best way to keep up with all of the updates is to, firstly, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe if you're listening via a podcast, but mostly stick to our social media, facebook.com/Cinematropolis or Instagram at the Cinematrop. Housekeeping out of the way, boring stuff aside, let's get to our icebreaker question for the week. So 28 years later, The Bone Temple is a direct sequel to 28 years later. I'm talking like 28 years later ends. There might be a few hours, maybe a day that's passed off screen, and we are right into the next story. So I thought it would be kind of fun to see what are our favorite direct sequels. And I want to specify these are sequels that occur either moments or within hours of the conclusion of the previous film. So one example I will throw out there, hopefully I'm not taking someone's answer, would be Star Wars The Last Jedi. For example, that movie picks up moments, if not seconds, after the conclusion of The Force Awakens. LaRon Chapman, I'll throw it to you first. What is your favorite direct sequel?
I feel like the only correct answer to this question is Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me.
Oh, behave. Yeah. Yeah, baby. Yeah.
But to be more serious, I think my favorite direct sequel would be, we just got The Whole Bloody Affair earlier this year, or was it last year now? Kill Bill Volume 2. And I think that the reason I chose this one in particular is I always loved Kill Bill growing up, and I was very young when I watched it, so I liked it for the whiz bang boom of all of the directing and what have you. But there was something about the pacing of Volume 2 where it really kind of deepened the lore and kind of let us sit with these characters a little bit longer. And I think as a result of that, it made Kill Bill Volume 1 even better. And so it was such a privilege to be able to see those two pieces together in one whole, in one singular work. And I thought that yes, that was one of those sequels that I think that just made the entire enterprise better, as a result. So Kill Bill Volume 2, Quentin Tarantino.
Arguably, Quentin Tarantino would say it's not a direct sequel, but I'm not Quentin Tarantino.
That's fair. That's fair.
I don't need any more of Quentin Tarantino's podcast takes these days. Paul Dano's a gem. I will not hear anything otherwise. All right. Well, appreciate that, LaRon. Jada Merritt, what is your favorite direct sequel?
I was so worried that I was gonna have to like ponder over this for like 3 days, and then I realized, oh wait, I'm a Dune head. It's Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2.
Yes.
I genuinely can't speak highly of it enough. Just like the cinematography is fantastic. They're like an amalgamation of great performances. Rebecca Ferguson, Javier Bardem, obviously Timothée Chalamet. And it's just, I think, a really great story. Especially, I love watching it with people who don't know the story of Dune, and then they followed this innocent little boy in the first movie trying to become a man, and then they get towards the very end. Spoilers if you haven't seen it. If you haven't, sorry, go watch it. They see that, oh no, he's been the villain the whole time, and it's kind of, I think it's a great sort of subverting of expectations. And, David Lynch is cool, but Denis Villeneuve's Dune is my choice.
Great choice. I saw that. I was initially thinking there's no way they're going to release Dune Part 3, aka Doom Messiah, on the same day as Doomsday. I was sure they're going to blink, but now the actors are all like RDJ this last week was like talking about it with Timothée Chalamet on the stage.
Yep.
And so it's almost like now that it's been put out there and they didn't change it soon enough that everyone's starting to like really hype this up as like a cinematic event. And I don't know. I hope it works out.
Get ready for Doomsday.
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 What a weekend that will be, man.
That'll be great. 2 full days in the theater because I'll see both of them twice, of course, in the same weekend.
Yes.
Yeah. Great stuff. Dune Part 2, I think, is a great one. And a notable thing, I think, is that that's part of one book, but the way the movie does it is that direct sequel.
Mm-hmm.
Like another example of this might be any of the Lord of the Rings movies, really.
Yeah.
You could argue a similar thing there. Like the end of one movie leads directly into the beginning of the next movie. So I think... really astute selection, Jada. Adam Cortliff, what is your pick for your favorite direct sequel?
I mean, you stole my thunder straight away. Just Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. It has to be. Very topical as well, given that the extended editions are in the cinema right now. I'm going next weekend because The Fellowship's on the Friday, Two Towers Saturday, Return of the King on the Sunday. My wife's never seen them, so I'm like a little kid getting to watch it through her eyes. I'm like so excited. Just that movie's probably the whole trilogy, but I'm definitely in the minority where The Two Towers was my favorite growing up. So it was the first movie that got me sort of into movies as a whole, where I became a nerd for Lord of the Rings, still to this day. And then they announced that there's a Lego Minas Tirith coming out, and that just blew my mind. And I'll be there day one, picking that up to complete my Lord of the Rings collection. I don't think there's a sequel that comes close for me personally. I love Dune. I loved Kill Bill. I even wrote down Spider-Man No Way Home as like more of a
that's a good one.
Yeah.
Because I thought somebody would say Lord of the Rings. That's more just for this nostalgia. That was my first ever trip to the cinema in the US. I was in Times Square day one. Watching it
in New York. Man, that's a big one.
Yeah. And the culture is so different between the UK and US. People screaming when, again, spoilers, but when the other Spider-Mans come on screen, I've never seen anything like it. So it was just really cool to be immersed in the cinematic history that was going on before your eyes.
And that one too, like there was the component, there was so many things going for it. And that was also, I feel like for a lot of people, the first like big event post-COVID movie. I say post-COVID, it was still happening, but like that was when I think everyone's like, you know what, we're just going to go to the movies, forget it. Like the Spider-Man are all back, I'm there. And like, so the energy in that, and I would say in my theater as well, was just like it was just as high as like Endgame, for example, or like a new Star Wars movie where everyone was just screaming and cheering. That's a great, and you saw it in Times Square, New York, man. Incredible. Couple I didn't pick that I considered that I thought might come up. Halloween 2, the original. Did not. I really like that one. Thought one of our horror heads might pick that one. Back to the Future 2, another one that came to mind. And here's another one. This is a guilty pleasure. I'm not picking it. But you don't really know it's a direct sequel until, the twist of the movie. Spoilers for Saw 4. Like, technically direct.
Destination, what is it?
5. 5 is actually
Final
1.
Destination 5. Yeah,
you're right. It does lead directly to 1. Yeah, Final Destination 5. Yeah. So, Saw 4. John Wick 3. I don't know. That's shallow, but like I remember once the ending of John Wick Chapter 2, where basically that he has been excommunicated or whatever, and Ian McShane is like, because we have this relationship, I'm gonna give you 1 hour, and you just see him like limp, and he's already beat up from that entire movie, and you're just like, oh, this guy's already worn down. How is he gonna get out of this? What's that gonna look like? And it ends with him like limping out of the park with his dog, and then you get to part 3, and it's literally within the same hour, and it's like, and it's dark. Rainy, and you're like, oh my God. And I still think to this day, in terms of just like pure action cinema. The first like 20 to 30 minutes of the movie when he's trying to get out of New York is one of my favorite like action scenarios of like the last 20 years, because it's just like he's so worn down and literally everyone in the city is trying to kill him. It was such an enthralling experience for me. So
Yeah.
John Wick 3, Parabellum, I think is technically the subtitle.
Yeah.
Great pick. Listeners, what is your favorite direct sequel? You can let us know by commenting below if you're watching on YouTube or even on Spotify, or you can let us know by hitting us up on Instagram at the Cinematrop, or following us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinetropolis. But that said, let's get to our spoiler-free review of 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple.
I remember details, events, and people. The world had an order.
What's your name?
Spike.
No. I think your name is Jimmy.
The foundations. They seemed unshakable.
IMDb, 28 years later, The Bone Temple is described as Spike is inducted into Jimmy Crystal's gang on the mainland, Dr. Kelson makes a discovery that could change the world. So a few notable facts about The Bone Temple. This is the fourth film in the 28 Days post-apocalyptic zombie series and the second film in the 28 Years Later trilogy. And it picks up seemingly immediately after the conclusion of that previous film. It is budgeted at $63 million for production budget, not including marketing cost. Less good news. This is hot from the presses. The film opened at number 2 in the opening weekend, had estimated $13 million here in the U.S., behind Avatar in its 5th weekend. Pretty considerable decline from the opening weekend of 28 Years Later. That was in June. That actually opened at $30 million, so more than double. So this movie really needs some positive word of mouth and needs to leg out if it hopes to recover its budget. This is also notably Nia DaCosta's 5th film. I'm really excited, Lauren. We've actually never talked about Nia DaCosta on the podcast like in a proper review, and she's a really, really, really exciting director. So anyway, want to call out, this is her 5th film following last year's Hedda, 2023's The Marvels, 2021's Candyman, and her debut film in 2018, Little Woods. This film, 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, stars Ralph Fiennes, I've heard it both ways, Ralph Fiennes as Dr. Ian Kelson. And he's top billed in this one, by the way, versus being the with at the end of the credits from the last film. Jack O'Connell as Sir Lord Jimmy Crystal, Alfie Williams as Spike, and Aaron Kellyman as Jimmy Ink. Now, despite the box office woes I just mentioned, we don't have to panic. Because the third untitled entry of the trilogy was greenlit in December by Sony, and Danny Boyle will return to direct the final script from Alex Garland. Now, I don't know how Hollywood works anymore. They could ungreenlight it, but it was officially given the go-ahead to continue. So fingers crossed.
I will burn the studio down if they delete it for a tax write-off.
Please
Absolutely.
It would break my heart if we didn't get the third entry in this film. Actually, Jada, I want to throw it to you first because me and Lauren and Adam all reviewed 28 Years Later when that came out. I'd love to get your take, just in terms of the first film in this trilogy. Real quickly, what were your overall thoughts on that film?
I mean, I really enjoyed it. I had some friends who were kind of on both ends of the spectrum. There were some that were like, I didn't really get it, or, it wasn't really cohesive for me. Me personally, I really liked it. It was a fantastic coming of age story, I think, kind of wrapped into a horror setting. I think Alfie Williams is a really wonderful talent, and I can't wait to see what he does in the future. Jodie Comer, oh my goodness, what a legendary generational performance from her. She, I think, was the emotional through line of the film, and I think there's another character in The Bone Temple that has the same kind of role, but we can talk about that later. But yeah, I think Jodie Comer just really moved me in that film. So no, I really enjoyed it.
Incredible performance too, because I think one thing we even talked about on the show was the character was pretty underwritten, honestly, but like Jodie Comer like leveled up the material
Yeah.
considerably. So,
Yeah.
very good. So we were all pretty warm on 28 Years Later. So Adam Cortliff, I'll throw it to you first. Returning guest on the subject of 28 years. What did you think of The Bone Temple?
I loved it. I think 28 Years Later has grown on me even more so than when I was gushing over it on the show last time. I think the emotional beats, stylistically, it's incredible, and one of my favorite horror movies probably of all time, which is lofty praise, but uh, being British and seeing such a legendary British filmmaker bring such a unique concept to the screen from usual zombie movies is just a delight, and I think it's something that as British people we should treasure. Then to see Nia DaCosta bring what I would sort of say is the more Americanized version of a zombie movie. It's more what we're used to in terms of like the pacing's a lot faster, it's more graphic. I think there's going to be a lot of people that really do get on board with it. But as we're seeing from the box office, we're going to need that word of mouth to come across, because the first one was so divisive because it wasn't necessarily what people were expecting. But going into it, after seeing Hedda and loving Candyman as well from Nia DaCosta, I was thoroughly excited. My expectations were sky high, even though it was a January release. And then, even with those expectations as high as they were, I was pretty blown away, particularly by the ending, as I'm sure we'll get to.
Man, love to hear that. There's nothing like a movie that you have like these crazy expectations for it and it blows them away. It's so rare these days, especially for people who watch a lot of movies. You know, you kind of feel like you've seen it all. So I love to hear that from you. So Adam Cortliff coming in sky high on The Bone Temple. Ron Chapman, what did you think of The Bone Temple? Wait, I should say, LaRon Chapman, what did you think of your birthday film of the year, The
Yeah.
Bone Temple?
Yeah, they gifted this to me. This was my birthday gift from Nia DaCosta. So thank you for that. That was a gift. Yeah, I found this to be very exhilarating, both in terms of the unique tone that she establishes in this one, as well as kind of synthesizing all of the ideas and themes that were presented in the predecessors. Like last year's 28 Years Later, kind of pulled off the difficult feat of expanding, and broadening the universe that was already established, and I feel like with this one, and it definitely took the zombie film to a new height. I didn't think there's anything more to be explored in this genre. I felt like we've kind of covered all of our bases, and it still felt very much like those films. It had that grittiness and that visceralness about it. But we're exploring more human themes here in this one, and I felt like having introduced all of those very weighty themes about you know faith versus science, and all these different perspectives in a zombie movie seems pretty. I mean, like, it's to have teed all that up in the last one, and then to find a unique way to actually follow through with them in a way that is satisfying for the audiences. That was just, like, for me, a magic trick that she accomplished with this one. In many ways, I keep calling this a zombie hangout movie. And I think when you see it, you'll kind of understand what I mean by that. There's a surprising amount of depth and humor in this, even amidst all of the brutality that is on display.
It's
Like,
a very, very funny movie.
it's a very humorous movie in unexpected ways too, while still having a lot on its mind, and so, but yeah, just tonally, I'm just impressed by the command of the tone that she had with this, because it could almost teeter into being absurd, but just enough but she kept it kind of just in grips and just grounded enough, that it still worked, in this universe. And I'm going to go on a limb and just say I actually like this a tick more than the last one. So,
Oh, nice. Ron coming in extra hot. Love to hear that. Well said there. Jada, what did you think of The Bone Temple?
I really, really, really enjoyed this film. I think I'm still needing to watch Hedda. I think it's next on my to-do list in terms of watching movies, but something that I noticed because unlike a lot of people, I actually didn't mind the Marvels. I know she was very constrained by studio, the studio being on her back for that, but I feel like something that Nia DaCosta does so well as a director is establish connection and, embrace connections between characters rather than sort of having it be the, back while showing something pretty on the screen. Um, I think that because of the established characters and arcs that we got in the previous film in 28 years, I think in the Bone Temple, it's a lot easier for us to um, move with them and to understand why they're making the choices that they're making, except for, Jimmy, because at the end of, 28 years, they come in like this quasi Power Rangers, very silly, very like bombastic, whimsical group. And then immediately, as soon as you start the Bone Temple, it is completely the opposite. There is not a single ounce of whimsy to be found. Like, yes, they're silly, but there's still tension. And you can kind of see, like, I think as well, oh my goodness, I'm trying to say this in a way that's concise. Nia DaCosta does connection well, but she also does the deliberate absence of connection well. Because, you know, Spike is suddenly joining this group of people and, they've been together for a while and Spike's just sort of a little island while the rest of them are going through something mentally together.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just think Nia DaCosta is absolutely fantastic. The performances are great. The music, while not like a super big standout, is also really wonderful. Whatever people in the Scandinavian region are doing in terms of like film scores, they need to just have them do everything.
Yeah.
A lot of good needle drops.
Yeah, the
I have
needle
to say,
drops.
yeah. I would say that like the one I wouldn't say detractor. The one thing I missed from this film was the score. We got a really outstanding score in 28 Years Later that I honestly still listen to, even on its own. Like I think it's really tremendous, and that is missing here. It's not like a detractor because we also then in this movie the trade off is you get like really top shelf very well timed needle drops that I found to be quite effective. I don't want to spoil what some of them are. Some of them are very key to the plot. Some of them are about vibes, but it's like songs you've heard of. And the context is really well. I'm going to come out and say that I also love this film. I think this is exactly when we talk about wanting sequels doing new things. This is what we're talking about. This is not a movie that is rehashing the thing we just saw. It is actually going in a very different direction, both stylistically and also the storytelling goals are a lot different. However, it is also building on everything we got in the previous film. I look at 28 Years Later, it's sort of like setting the framework, setting the stage. And I know the Lord of the Rings comparisons may seem a little hyperbolic. Haven't seen the third film, so I guess that's to be determined. But, the Fellowship of the Ring kind of establishes the characters. It establishes the world. It establishes the stakes. And then Two Towers, you kind of spend a lot of time really getting a lot more time with the characters on their own individual journeys. And I feel like the big ideas on display were introduced. What is, how do, Garland and Boyle think about the state of the UK, the future of the UK, what it means for, I would say like UK history, but, to a larger extent, I would say even as Americans, like, the world's been through a lot and we're in a very dire time. I really found 28 Years reflecting on this in a very big, emotional, authentic way. And this film, so those are like the big ideas that it establishes, and it establishes the key character being Spike. This movie, and Kelson, of course, this movie really digs in. And Laurent, the Hangout movie is apt because you're really spending a lot of time with Kelson. It's like, we really didn't see Kelson until the third act of the last movie. And you're like, what's that guy's deal? In this movie, we find out what this guy's deal is, and it's really interesting to watch. But not only that, we get to see what his deal is. We get to see what Jimmy's deal is. And then where it gets really interesting, the sparks really fly, is when you get those two together, sort of seeing how they are two people with their own like worldviews and ideas of like the reality they're living in and how to approach it and how those butt up against each other and how that impacts everyone around them. So I found this to be an incredibly rewarding follow-up to 28 Years Later, where I don't know that 28 Years Later it wasn't necessarily making profound statements as much as it was like really sort of asking big questions.
Yeah.
And this is starting to provide some answers, or at least having the conversation about the answers, with presumably the third film kind of like really bringing home, okay, what is Garland trying to get at with this whole new trilogy? And I just found this to be like a really, really stunning, bold and ambitious follow up. And you guys have already said so many nice things about Nia DaCosta, but it is bizarre how stylistically different this is from the last film. And I love that she made a Nia DaCosta film, and she didn't try to make a Danny Boyle film.
Yeah.
I think it really helps this stand apart on its own while also being kind of like, again, part of that same connective, like larger story. But man, guys, this is what we want from sequels, right? Like just crazy swings for the fences, new things. Speaking of that style and approach, though, let's dig in a little bit for maybe listeners who want us to elaborate a little further. So I think let's say Jada, or I think this is definitely a gorier film than the last film.
Yeah.
How would you kind of compare the style and approach to the story to Danny Boyle, what he brought to 28 Years Later?
Yeah, I feel like Nia DaCosta's style, like directing style in this, is a lot more focused and very much less abstract. Like she says, I have a story to tell, and this is the story. We're not gonna kind of derive from it too much. We're just gonna keep it small. It's kind of crazy how small and intimate it feels, even though they're traveling really large depths in this film. Um, One thing that I feel like I feel one of my only sort of downsides for this film in terms of the style is that it really focuses less on Spike, because that's kind of what, made me love the first film was, it was his story. But I do understand the intent. The first movie was Spike's story, and this is more Dr. Kelson's story and Jimmy's story. Um, but I don't know. I feel like with this trilogy specifically, Danny Boyle set up the first film, and that was to reintroduce us to this world, because we've been out of it for, over a decade. And Nia DaCosta's job was to pick it up and carry us along, and I think she did that beautifully. She did it so well, so smoothly. The way that she directs everyone with Alex Garland's writing, I feel like really elevates the material. Um, and like I said, it's those connections, it's those conversations between Spike and any one of the Jimmies, or between any of the Jimmies between each other, or the main Jimmy and any of the fingers, things like that. Just I feel like, you know, it just worked for me, besides my one gripe.
Sure. Not everything can be like 6 out of 5. Right.
Yeah. Right.
Adam, what did you make of, how would you compare, like, just especially coming at this from the context of the, the UK background, how would you sort of compare the style and approach to what you saw in the last film?
Yeah, it will be echoing some of the points that Jada's made. I've already used the word a little bit more Americanized, a little bit more mainstream. I think this is a movie that if you didn't watch the first one, you could sort of get on board with what's going on quite easily. It's a very easy watch for horror movie fanatics, whereas Danny Boyle has sort of been unapologetically himself in the first movie, where it's like, this is Spike's story, and we're going to tell Spike's story. Dr. Kelson comes in at the end, sure, but this is fundamentally about Spike. And it provides one of the most moving scenes I saw last year, when Spike's at the top of the Bone Temple. And that we don't get the same emotional, like, I say highs as in terms of what it stirred up inside of me, but we don't get that in this movie. But that's not necessarily to its detriment. I know some people probably will mark it down for that, but for me, this is a completely different movie. It's not meant to be the same. If it was supposed to have the same stylistic approach, Danny Boyle would be directing it. It's very deliberate that they wanted this movie to feel different, more brutal, have the question of science v faith be more pertinent in people's minds, not just having Spike as that core person for each and every movie. And the way that the 28 years later ended, and it was very divisive. I think Nia DaCosta has pulled that story together beautifully well. So now it makes 28 years later ending feel so much more apt, and people, after seeing this, will understand why it's finished the way that it did because of the way that the Jimmies are portrayed in this movie. And I think Heather's a really good example because the way that Tessa Thompson's character, and I forget the name of the other actress in Heather, but it was a very like character driven piece. This is exactly the same, and it's two separate stories of two different characters who have
Yeah.
two very different outlooks of life,
Mhm.
but they're both done phenomenally well, where you sort of understand where each person's coming from. And like she's done amazingly well to make me at one point even feel sorry for Sir Jimmy Crystal, which
Yeah.
should not be a thing, but she's taken
Biggest
the
surprise of the
writing.
movie. Yeah.
Yeah, she's taken the writing from Alex Garland and brought it together amazingly well. So whilst it does feel entirely different compared to the first, especially visually, there's some crazy shots in Danny Boyle's first movie where, particularly when Jodie Comer's in the sea and it goes all red and you just see her eyes. Like there's frames of the movie that are burned into my memory. There's not as many in this movie, but I'm glad that she's brought across her own cinematographer that she's worked with before to create shots that she wanted to create and make this her own rather than trying to follow in the footsteps of a completely different filmmaker.
Yeah. I think that's really well said. I think you sort of nailed it. Like I would say cinematic moments stick out to me more from 28 years later, but the vibes from this movie, if that makes sense. Like the again, it's like that hangout, like just the feeling of going on the journey with the characters. This feels a lot more intimate. Whereas the cinematic moments from the last year, they feel bigger, more mythical. You mentioned the Bone Temple. There's also the causeway scene at the end where they're running. Like those are just like images that, yeah, like you could frame those and put them out, and you like it would just evoke so many different emotions and ideas. Whereas I think here it's just like the feeling of intimacy and quality time and just kind of living and breathing the same air as the characters a little bit. LaRon,
Yeah.
anything you want to add to that comparison?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a playfulness to this one that where not that you're necessarily supposed to be having this great time. There's a lot of horrible things happening, but it's getting to the crux that even in the midst of all of this, tragedy, there is humanity still, and there's still, and that's really what's carrying them on through this process, or that's what's going to sustain them. And I love that emphasis comes together with Dr. Kelson and the Samson character. I found that dynamic to be just fascinating, funny, of course, but there's a lot of humor that derives from that. But I also just found their dynamic to be very tender and empathetic, and I think that what's the real monsters in this and the real brutality in this isn't really coming from the zombies in this one. And that's what I found very, very an interesting take, because that has been the focus for so many of these movies. It's this unstoppable force, and it's just nihilism. And here we're seeing that if there's a more complex idea about what this virus is and how it affects the infected, and by extension what we can do about that moving forward. And I think that it's exploring some interesting ideas thematically, while also, as you mentioned, like Nia DaCosta is putting her own stamp on it. She's respecting the source material. She's respecting what's come before, but she's also putting her own unique stamp on it. And I think that finding that balance between the two of it is such a gift, because it's really hard to do. And typically when we switch directors, there's normally a jarring tonal drop, or like everyone's just like, this is not, and she's able to still harness what we love about the other one while still adding something fresh and interesting and alive, with this one. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. I think we kind of like nailed. There's a lot of differences there. I think another big one, just stylistically, is the editing, and this is a Danny Boyle, definitely a Danny Boyle thing. Like no one does editing like him. And I rewatched 28 Years Later the night before we went to the Bone Temple, and it was really interesting to do the direct comparison because his editing is so frantic.
Yeah.
Which is actually a major plus and it's unique, but it definitely makes things feel faster and more overwhelming, whereas this is not that way. Again, it just feels more lived in, I think, because you're able to spend more time. Even in the small things like how long does this shot last? How long before you cut to something else? Just it feels just like you have more space to breathe.
Yeah, for sure.
Which goes a long way. Yeah, I think we have a lot to talk about in spoilers here. I do just want to say though, before we get into our rankings and letter grades, Fiennes is incredible in this movie.
Yes.
He goes
Mhm.
so hard. And he's an actor who at this point in his career doesn't have to do stuff like this. And it just tells you like how much how much he loves the material, that he's not only sort of playing this like in 28 Years Later, almost like this Obi-Wan Kenobi elderly sort of mentor
Yeah.
figure. This is his movie, really. And to see how he approaches conflict, how he approaches the unknown, the curiosity he cares about, and then as we'll talk about more in spoilers, how he reacts to, potential threats. I mean, just unbelievable performance. There's a lot of layers to it. There's a number of scenes where you can see he's clearly terrified, but is like playing it so straight. And I assume this is probably a British thing. He just like, everything is like, this is clearly a crazy situation I'm in. Clearly terrified, but I'm just going to approach it with some dignity. And to be able to play that so straight in a movie that's a zombie apocalypse that has all these like humorous beats in it, it's a dance, both literal in the context of this movie, but also figurative, a dance in terms of the actor, like tonally, that I think few actors will be able to pull off with such expertise. It's super impressive. But the whole cast is great, but I really think he's a standout performer in this movie. Okay, before we get to letter grades, I thought this would be an interesting exercise. We now have 4 of these 28 movies, 28 days, years, weeks, whatever. That's enough to do a ranking, right? You can do a ranking, I guess. Once you get past 3, that's where I'm like, there's enough to talk about here. So I thought it might be fun if we rank the 28 years, days, whatever movies. And Adam Courtliff, I'll start for you. How would you rank these films?
Yeah, so at the bottom is 28 weeks later, and then I think there is a ginormous chasm up to the rest. I think you can easily interchange between 28 years and the Bone Temple, and I wouldn't have any arguments. Myself personally, I've got the Bone Temple in third and 28 years later in second, but any given day you can interchange them. But I think first for me has to be 28 days later, just because of the cultural impact. The way that it was filmed will probably never happen again. It's stood up to the test of time, which a lot of movies don't do, particularly in the zombie world. And I think it's framed so much that has happened since that for me, it's just always going to be on a pedestal that I don't think anything will get close to.
Right. I mean, it's the original. It's like almost impossible to touch it just because clearly it's had the largest impact, right? I think that's a fair assessment. Jada Merritt, how would you rank the 28 films?
The
All 28 of them.
series, all 28. Are we talking about the MCU?
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm near the same as Adam. Obviously the 28 weeks is the weakest of the series by far. I think it's not a terrible film, but it's not really necessarily what the series needed. It kind of broadens it a little bit too much, makes it a little bit too urban, tries to expand more into, than what it should have been, which was a very intimate story in a large city. 28 years in the Bone Temple are pretty much on the same level for me. Right now, I'm putting 28 years above the Bone Temple, but it could change at any moment. I feel like I need to watch Bone Temple again. Um, and then, yeah, the first for me is also 28 days, because it was a pioneer of the modern zombie genre. Like, people don't realize what a shift that there was, because all you saw from 20th century like zombie related films is they were almost all supernatural related. And
Yeah.
that was the first one that was like, oh no, this is like a biological contagion. Like this is like a virus that can like be spread. And we have so many great
Yeah.
zombie pieces of media all around the world because of the popular, reception to 28 Days. So, yeah.
Well, and I also related, there's the biological component, but also like fast zombies were not a thing, really. I don't want to
Yeah.
say it didn't exist at all, but they certainly weren't popularized before 28 Days Later. Because you get 28 Days Later, and then a couple years later, you get the Zack Snyder Dawn of the Dead, and all of a sudden, fast zombies everywhere for quite a while.
Yeah.
So yeah, huge cultural impact.
Yeah.
All right, Lon, how does yours compare to Jada and Adam's list?
Yeah, very similar. I feel like 28 Days Later is super foundational. And I think what we're grasping at is the naturalism of it. It feels like a documentary. It doesn't feel like a horror film, especially the way that it's shot. Um, and it made all of the thrills that much more realistic and visceral and scary and alive, because I think also, and when we were putting that in context now, we revisited that one post COVID, and we're like, we didn't handle this too dissimilar to the way that this was. I mean, obviously, it's a more exaggerated version of it. We didn't turn into ravaging monsters, or did we? You know, it's
People are
just
predictable.
people, and and it's like in many ways, it was commenting on the way that these different structures would handle a tragedy like this, and it's interesting the parallels there. So I would say that's the first one. Um, and then maybe proximity, but I know that I walked out of both of the last 28 years knowing that I watched two great films. There's just something so unique and different about the Bone Temple comparative uh, to 28 years later that it stands out to me a little bit more, because there's certain set pieces and certain things that I'm so excited to revisit, so I'm going to put that in second place, and then 28 years. And then, like he said, a huge odyssey, and then we get to 28 weeks. 28 weeks. And I think 28 weeks again is not bad. It's definitely a fine film, but compared to these, yeah, they're not. It's night.
Yeah.
And day. It's night and day.
Having rewatching those before we did 28 years last June, I like 28 weeks. It's a very solid film, but it definitely feels a lot more like straight Hollywood version of the story. And frankly, the last act of that movie, it's a very abrupt ending,
Yeah.
which I didn't recall from previously watching. So yeah, for those reasons, I am in Syncopatico. This is at the bottom of the list considerably. And then you get up to the list. I'm struggling with this. I think I'm with you, Adam and Jada. You really could change the order. 28 years and Bone Temple. They're both really unique in their own way. Both times I thought I've never seen a zombie movie like this. Both times. And they just complement each other so well. So it's hard to say right now. I'm going to lean, because 28 years later comes first and sort of paves the way for Bone Temple, I'm going to give it the edge. So I would go 3 by a hair, and ask me next week. By a hair, third place, the Bone Temple, then 28 years later. And then, yes, of course, 28 days later. Cultural impact, all the things you guys have already said. Let's get to letter grades then. Sounds like we all like the movie quite a lot. How much, though? Jada Merritt, what letter grade would you give 28 years later, the Bone Temple?
Oh, it's bad. It's bad. A minus. A minus. I would give it like a straight A, but it's just, I really wish that they had done more with Spike in this film. But genuinely, that being my only gripe, that's a very good problem to have, because I know we'll probably get him in the third film soon. So I just feel like I need to see all three to give like true, like, how does this line up? But right now it's an A minus. So I don't hate it.
Nice. And Spike is in the movie. Well, but more in spoilers on Spike. He does have a role to play. But
Yes.
yeah, not the main pro tag though, which was
Mhm.
interesting. Adam Courtliff, what letter grade would you give 28 years later, the Bone Temple?
The same. It'd be an A minus, and just building on what Jada said, the omission of Aaron Taylor Johnson as well entirely was something that left me questioning, given that it was a direct sequel, and we had, I think there's like 3, maybe 4 days or nights portrayed in this movie. Given that 28 years later ends with him looking to cross the causeway could get answered, and I could be made to look like a fool in the future. But just for now, I'd have it at the A-.
LaRon Chapman, what letter grade would you give 28 years later at the Bone Temple?
Yeah, I'm also an A- on this. I think it's really great genre filmmaking. It's thoughtful, it's substantive, and it's thrilling, and it has, like, again, just some really exciting characters, some really complex themes that are really fun to mull over as you walk out of the theater. It's not empty-headed, it's not just about empty visceral thrills, although those are here as well. And that's my favorite. That's my favorite when you merge, what could be a B movie and make it really, something meaningful and substantive to talk about afterwards. There's a lot of things that we can draw from this and in our own our own right now cultural relevance. So I found that also just really rewarding, and I'm just really excited to see a Black female direct a genre movie and for it to be, well received. That's exciting in Hollywood. That's what we want to see.
I guess A- all around, because I also have it down for an A-. I think this is an exceptional sequel. I guess it is one of those, there's a few open questions I have, and which presumably will be answered by the third movie that could actually then put this up to an A when you have the complete picture. But no, I think this is an outstanding example of the kind of sequel that we want to see coming out of Hollywood. I really liked Candyman. I loved this movie, and I really can't wait to see what Nia DaCosta does next, because this is an outstanding genre film. I would say it's like a B movie with A movie ideas and execution in a lot of ways. And I think Nia DaCosta brings quite a lot to making that, realizing that vision. So for all that said, A- for The Bone Temple. If you do not want to be spoiled on The Bone Temple, go ahead and tune out now.
I possess the Necronomicon. I've crushed your pathetic army. Now I'll have my vengeance.
Buckle up, bonehead, because you're going for a ride.
We are now full-blown spoilers. For those of you who listened to our 28 years later review last summer, Adam actually came in and brought some really invaluable context about the Jimmy character, i.e. the blonde hair and the tracksuit. To kick spoilers off, and Adam, I don't know that you necessarily need to get super as detailed as you did our last episode. Appreciate that breakdown. But maybe give us a little bit of context on the significance of that, and maybe walk me through sort of like your reading in terms of like how that shaped what we saw on the screen for this film.
Yeah. So to Americanize it again, Jimmy, who is portrayed in this movie, is essentially a character based around Jimmy Savile, who is the most heinous individual you have ever come across. He would be like the UK version of Jeffrey Epstein. His career of crimes went on for decades, but given that 28 days later occurred before all of this was brought to light, long after Jimmy Savile's death, he was seen still as an icon of British culture. Hence why Jimmy Crystal, who was a kid at the time when the virus became a thing, would have idolized Jimmy and built his whole persona around him. And I think the way that the movie digs into the science versus faith, and particularly with how Jimmy Crystal sees himself as a Satanist, portraying Jimmy Savile on screen as the worst of humanity is actually such a good road to go down. I was worried at the end of 28 years later as well as to why Jimmy Savile was getting any more screen time than we've seen before. But after hearing you guys not even heard of him, I thought that it was a great thing to do, to bring it to Hollywood, to bring light on to these individuals that are still to this day getting away with crimes which have been brushed under the carpet for decades and decades and decades. So why not bring to light the worst thing, well, one of the worst thing that's happened in British culture, and bring it to the world to see in the shape of Jimmy Crystal. And people will notice that they say, "How's that?" quite a lot. And again, that's one of Jimmy Savile's big catchphrases from back in the day. So I've even seen some discourse on Twitter about it isn't specifically said that this is Jimmy Savile. But I think that's just more of a, you don't need to be spoon-fed everything. All the clues and context are there. The tracksuits alone should be enough,
Call a
especially with the
spade a
long
spade.
legs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So to see it portrayed as it's been done, I think the writing is superb, and it sent shivers down my spine. And I do really feel sorry for the victims of Jimmy Savile's crimes that are still, to this day, living with what they've had to go through. But seeing that he's portrayed as the despicable human being that he is on a big screen will hopefully bring them some sort of justice long after it should have been given to them.
Yeah. I appreciate you providing that context, and I think it's super important for us as American viewers to understand, like, this iconography goes a long way, and I think it sort of ties into some of the ideas we were talking about in the 28 Years Later. That is in a lot of ways Danny Boyle and Alex Garland, two British filmmakers, really sort of reflecting on, post-Brexit, post-COVID, what is the UK anymore? And they're doing it through the vehicle of a zombie film. So for them to take what is like essentially, as you're putting it, like one of the worst crimes that was sort of swept under the rug and putting that front and center. And in the context of this movie, him being a Satanist, I feel like goes a really long way in saying, like, it's oftentimes our society, yes, I know this is the context of UK, but I think a lot of this could be extended to America and worldwide as well. A lot of times, just because someone is put on a pedestal does not mean that they are actually citizens. They are not good people. Just because they're famous and well-known and on TV or the radio or podcast does not make them a model citizen that are looking out for the greater good. Was sort of kind of like my read on it. But I wanted to, like, on the note of that, we have Spike in the film, who is initiated at the beginning. The very first scene of the movie is him initiated largely against his will as one of the fingers. Basically, he's told if he doesn't kill one of the Jimmies, he's going to die. And out of self-defense, and really like a very visceral self-defense, like Nix is one of the Jimmies and is then adopted into the gang. As far as we can tell on screen, sure, they kill infected, but really they're more about, wreaking havoc on the non-infected people who are in the UK, walking to people's houses, eating their food, murdering them for fun. And again, as you said, he claims to be the son of Satan, aka Old Nick. Also, that was the thing I didn't know. Fun trivia for Caleb, probably a British thing. Old Nick equals Satan. Actually, didn't know that. I mean, you kind of pick it up pretty quickly, but did not know that was another name for Satan.
Nicholas Scratch.
Okay, Old Nick. Okay, that tracks. But anyway, this character he's very charismatic, and he's able to sort of like pit the Jimmies against each other as a form of control. And I think that the story from my POV, and I really want to like dig into it with you guys, especially with the context of knowing exactly who this Jimmy character is a representative of. I think the story really comes into shape after Jimmy Crystal and Dr. Kelson meet and talk in the Bone Temple. How did you read that entire scene, just in general? Because I actually found that to be one of the deeply funniest scenes of the movie. So essentially, one of the fingers like, I saw your dad, and he's like, you saw my dad? No, you didn't see my dad. No, I did. He was dancing with demons and stuff. Like, that whole thing was very funny. Anyway, I'll turn it over to you guys. What did you guys think of this sort of like initial interaction between Kelson and Jimmy Crystal? Laurent, I'll throw it to you first.
There's a clash of ideologies in a comedic way, in a weird way. And it's kind of like both of the themes of the movie are having a conversation with one another. And I found that very interesting because you have Jimmy, who has this like brute, forceful, kind of uncompromising demeanor. And he's exploiting the fear and paranoia of the other Jimmies, to his benefit, to influence these kind of vulnerable people who are very desperate for guidance and direction. And he's leveraging that pain, to do his bidding to obtain more power and control of a really uncontrollable situation and landscape that they're in. He doesn't have nearly as much control as he believes he does, and then Dr. Kelson, being kind of representing a little bit more like pragmatism and logic, and curiosity. He has a cooler kind of temperament, and he has a very investigative mind that actually yields results, and a possible, we're in spoiler section, right?
Yes.
Okay, and a possible cure, for all the madness that's happening, and kind of a reinstatement of these values, human values that existed before this virus kind of took hold. And he's kind of the perfect foe to him because um, he's basically, it's kind of like the emperor has no clothes on. He's kind of revealing to Jimmy just all of his falsehoods, in a way. Um, and now that he's in this space, he feels threatened, and like he's like, "Oh, I don't actually have control of this, and now you're going to make me look silly," in that sort of way. And I found that to be an interesting dialogue about faith and science, and where people stand on those things, and how there are some unexplainable things, that certain things that could be explained away very easily with science, and how do these things collide, coexist, and is there room for both of these things to exist? And I found that interesting. So yeah.
Yeah. Well said. Dialogue where they are real characters, but they definitely are stand-in for larger ideas and even institutions sort of like conversing with one another in a really interesting, surprisingly compelling way. It's very humorous. Kelson's like, "Oh, who are you? Oh, okay. So you're looking for Saint Nick. You thought I was
Yeah.
Saint Nick. Oh, wait. Did you just say your dad was? Did you just
Yeah.
say?
Yeah.
You said your dad was. Oh, so you think you're the son of the? It was just very comedic the way he's like slowly like,
Yeah.
oh my god, this guy's a psychopath.
Yeah.
Real.
Oh, you're full of shit. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Well, and
yeah.
not only that, like, oh, you could like turn on a dime and kill me right now.
Yeah, well,
Like,
that's- yeah.
like, Jada, what did you kind of make of this interaction?
So that conversation scene that they have, I feel like is mainly just to serve as a confirmation for everything that we've seen in the lead up to that moment from those characters. Because I've seen a lot of people say that the two of them, Jimmy and Kelson, are meant to be a science versus faith type thing, but I feel like that's a really surface level analysis of it because you can't really have one without the other, and it's less faith and more belief, or maybe it's more belief than faith or more faith than belief, either one. But I truthfully feel like Jimmy is actually the one that is devoid of faith. He's gone through such a trauma at such a young age,
Mhm.
and then he just kind of turns to the voice in his head, and then he grew up knowing of this figure, Satan, and then just kind of attributed that to, you know, everything that he believes, and so he acts on that. Dr. Kelson, on the other hand, grew up an atheist, but I think he has the most faith out of anyone in this film
Mhm.
because he has faith in people.
Yeah.
Right.
You see that in 28 Years, where he treats all of the dead bodies that he finds with dignity. He, gives them a place. He, makes it his life's work after the breakout to sort of memorialize all of these people that he's come across.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Jimmy, the, self-proclaimed spiritual person who, is speaking to his father, Satan, treats all of the people that he comes across as disposable. He treats their bodies terribly. If they're dead, he just kind of leaves them out to dry, to burn, to be taken by the infected. I just feel like while on the surface they can represent one thing internally and through their actions, they kind of represent almost a dichotomy, like a switch
Mhm.
between those ideals, to me personally.
Yeah, no, I think you're right to point out that I think to make it a simple science versus faith argument would be very surface level because I also think what's interesting is you kind of see that Jimmy he does have faith. There's two or three layers here. He believes that he does believe he's the son of the devil. Actually, I think that was a revealing moment of the scene for me as well. Is like, no, he actually believes his own like Kool-Aid, right? As a cult leader, but he's also a bad actor because he walks in and he's like, oh, okay, this isn't what I thought, but I have to exploit this situation in order to maintain this sort of like lie that I'm upholding for my cult, right? So it's he does have the belief that he is the son of the devil, but he also needs them to believe a lie. So like that he himself has sort of put out there. Versus like I think you said to your point for Kelson, he's coming in from a much more empathetic, curious point of view where he's asking a lot of questions, trying to understand who are you? What are you about? How can we make this a pleasant interaction? And oftentimes the empathy versus like Kelson's out trying to look out for other people and himself, but primarily other people, versus Jimmy, who is only looking out for himself in the situation. But they both have elements of faith and belief, I think, in their like own particular worldview that they're expressing in the moment. Adam, what did you make of the interaction?
You can stop me if I'm getting ahead of myself, but I also thought that there was political undertones to their actual first meeting. Alex Garland and Danny Boyle from the first film, they're not one to mince around with putting political ideologies into movies. And the way that I've seen from 28 years later, it kind of felt like there was also a cult leader, which we're seeing in Western political societies becoming more of a thing, desperately trying to maintain power over his followers. So in that first meeting, he's trying to use that to his advantage with Kelson to keep him on side, keep the Jimmies on side, keep them in check, whilst you've got Kelson who's trying to find the good in society and just work with one another to either find a cure or just live in an acrimonious society where there's not infighting. We are humans. We should work together. We should have compassion for one another. So it kind of felt, as well as building on that faith versus science, that I personally took it, that it was also two completely different ideologies from that standpoint, and it was very relatable towards today's world where you've got people that do hide behind faith to sort of get their own narrative out there and be this fundamental figure that people follow, when in actual fact it is just a curtain they're using to just have blind followers and use it to their own advantage and exploit it. Whereas I think Kelson was shown as just somebody willing to put down his own life to better society, which I think is the vast majority of people. And I think he was a portrayal of that. And we saw it with Spike as well, which we'll get to. And I think that was the point which it really cemented it for me about Kelson being that person for society when he's evidently there to just put other people first.
Yeah, well, let's move on to the Spike piece, because I think this is where you have the conversation that sort of like sets up the climax in a lot of ways. Okay, so Dr. Kelson has to uphold this lie in order to get these people to go away. He knows that he's on the cusp of a breakthrough, or he believes he's on a cusp of a breakthrough with Samson. So that seems very important to him. Like he's literally about to kill Samson until Samson says the word moon. And he's like, oh my gosh, this is a thing I've got to focus. So all of a sudden, I think he has that whole line. He's like, for the first time in ages, I was afraid to die because I realized I had something I needed to do. Which I found to be really, really, really compelling. Because it just says so much about him that he is not just looking out for himself. He's actually trying to make the world right in his own way. There's a really good line he has that's I think honestly is really going to stick with me, where he talks about, when he's talking to Jimmy about the old world, and he said, yeah, there was drama, but the foundations, we believed they were unshakable until they weren't. And that really sticks with me, especially when you think about it, Adam, in that context that you're talking about in the world we live in today, how you have these devious bad actors, figures who are desperately trying to inflict pain upon other people, and that is also a control mechanism. And this is not just one country, by the way. This is multiple countries around the globe. But you have Kelson, who is this guy who's looking out for other people, and he's almost over it. I've lived my life. The world's gone to hell in a handbasket. I've done my best to help people when they come along. If I die, no big deal. Until Samson. And then all of a sudden he has a renewed like cause or objective he needs to complete. So it's only once he has that conversation, he's like, oh no, I have to create this whole ruse to get these people off my back. That is until Spike shows up. So I want to kind of dive into that a little bit, because I think that also sort of signals ideologically where these movies are going. You have Kelson, who is willing to be the bad actor in order to get these people off his back so he can focus on his mission, until he sees that one of the cultists is a person he knows. So Adam, actually, I'll throw it back to you. I mean, on the note of Spike, how did you sort of read his role in this story, and ultimately why Kelson decided to sort of change his plan for Spike?
Yeah, I think going back to like the first movie, I feel like Spike was the first person that he's probably come across in years that shares his same like ideas. He's gone through hell and high water just to try and find a cure for his mum. He's got the same compassion, the same sort of feelings, and he's just such a young boy, but also has these feelings which even most adults might not show that level of willing to sacrifice themselves just for the better of their others. And the this final scene where Kelson sees Spike is probably the first time where I was emotionally moved, and it is very much down to how well Ray Fiennes and Alfie Williams act, because you can just see in both of their eyes how desperate they are for this whole situation to end. And I think it was at that moment where they looked into each other's eyes that Kelson realized that the only possible way for there to be a cure or for the world to move over is to rid it of this evil. And this will be the only opportunity I have, but it will also give Spike the chance of a life, because that has been taken away from him. And I think it's obviously shown throughout the movie and the little pieces that we do get of Spike that morally he's not going to crumble to what the Jimmies want. He just wants away from the heinous crimes that they're committing. And I think that just sometimes a picture paints 1,000 words, and there didn't need to be any dialogue necessarily between them of any pertinent nature. Just the connection that they had from the first movie and what they'd already gone through. I think that was just evident in that single couple of seconds where he was like, I've done what I can for humanity. Because at that point he didn't know what's happened to Samson. So this is what I have left to give to the world, rid it of this evil, and hope that it prospers from there.
Yeah, man, well said. I think you nail it. The acting in that moment, critical. I think the emotional weight of the movie hinges on that. No dialogue, just them looking at each other and realizing how have we ended up here? How did we get here? And we can't let this continue. Like if this is to continue, there is nothing good. The world is hopeless.
Yeah.
I think. Jada, what did you read of that? The whole sort of like role of Spike in the film?
I feel like despite what Spike went through in 28 years later, he kind of, to Kelson, is a signifier of innocence in all of this. Just because, like, even though, yeah, he's, went through quite a few trials and tribulations, he's still largely very sheltered to what actually goes on the mainland of the UK. Because I'm sure the Jimmies aren't the only ones who are out there, out there brutalizing people. Because it's that classic zombie trope, like, yeah, the zombies are terrible, but it's really the people you need to watch out for. I feel like Dr. Kelson has seen that innocence in Spike and feels that if he, protects him, then, you know, that can be a legacy that Dr. Kelson carries on besides the physical, his bone temple, his work with Samson, everything that's done. I feel like he wants to see society kind of be rebuilt into a semblance of what once was, not exactly on the foundations of what society used to be. But yeah, I feel like Spike is just a, you know, he's the little baby, the little girl that's immune to the virus, to everything. He's kind of that sort of figure, I think, in this.
Yeah, I mean, like, what good is Samson if you let the Jimmies of the what good is a cure in Samson if the Jimmies of the world are ones running the show?
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
kind of what I took from that. Lauren, what was your read on this, like, sort of, role that Spike is playing with Kelsom?
Well, what I love about this entire conversation is how little we are talking about zombies. Like that shows you like the depth of ideas that are in this story. But yes, um, I feel like Spike is a bridge to both worlds, in many ways. He's been exposed to both sides of it. He's even, against his will been here with the Jimmies and kind of processing their ideology and processing the way that their philosophy on the world. And but I think in this space, yeah, like he kind of represents a path forward, like a chart, and he has that purity and that innocence as Jada was mentioning, is that he is the future if we allowed him to survive this particular moment. And he's going to bring with that everything he's learned about what came of this and what can move forward. And Dr. Kelson's a great person to teach him in that regard, teach him those foundational tools. And so in many ways it became absolutely urgent and necessary for him to preserve, like, you're the most important thing to protect right now, because one, he has his youth. He obviously has again, that innocence and that purity. He is the symbol of hope, for humanity moving forward. And so that becomes paramount in that particular moment. So Spike is really a bridge to the future, from everything that's happened so far.
Yeah. No, I think that's well said. Again, just top notch directing, that entire sequence. I mean, we can that whole sequence where Kelson comes out and does the dance leading up to that moment was honestly some top shelf filmmaking. Also just very unexpected. And pretty sure, did they play the Number of the Beast? Did they play the whole song? I think they did, or close to it.
Pretty close, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was fist pumping the whole
yeah.
time during the Iron Maiden. It's like, oh my gosh, let's go.
It's like Ralph Fiennes is like, or Kelson's like, oh god, I gotta make sure these guys never come back. I have to go as hard as humanly possible with the theatrics of this deal. Because even Jimmy Crystal was like, what the whoa.
Yeah, like, and it's so funny because that sequence has been marketed pretty heavily like that, and I had no idea. I was like, what is going on in that moment? Because I want to see and it is not at all what I thought it was going to be, in the best way, in the most refreshing way. I didn't realize I was like going to be like just vibing to it. I expected that to be this horrifying moment where Dr. Kelson maybe turns to the dark side or something crazy or something. And in this moment, it's like, oh no, he's just putting on a really good show,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I'm here for it.
Well, and what did you guys think? I mean, like, again, it's both kind of darkly hilarious and just bleak when he turns the ties on Jimmy Crystal using his own lie. I thought that was just really outstanding writing. He had gotten these people to buy into this lie, and then he said, no, there is one more thing, and Jimmy Crystal's like, no, I don't think there is. No, there is. There is, I thought that was great. And as he was walking through, it's like, the same way that the father sacrificed his son, I also need to sacrifice my son. Like, it was just chef's kiss.
Which made sense. It made sense with the former traditions, and I thought it was
I was like, you know what? Yeah, no, that actually tracks. That actually tracks.
That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Yeah. And the whole audience just goes, oh shit.
Yeah.
You done fucked up now. It's like, but yeah.
The theater, when I was watching that, was very reactive. That entire sequence was like everyone was like into and kind of like laughing or clapping. It was just a good moment. Great acting, great writing all around. And I do think it goes a certain way to demonstrate how, again, belief, faith, cults, how these things are all intertwined. How cult leaders can use beliefs to manipulate the group to take certain actions. So yeah, I don't know. Just top notch stuff. Now I want to go talk a little bit more about sort of where this fits into the trilogy larger thematically, and I think this is actually where Samson and Dr. Kelson play a pretty vital role. So again, the Bone Tipple being a continuation of 28 years later, including sort of serving a bit of a referendum on the treating the infected as less than. We saw that. Kelson was all about that. The memento mori deal. Every life is sacred. Every life deserves to be remembered, infected or not. Another thing that stuck out to me rewatching the first one is Spike is definitely not into the killing of the zombies. Like, not into it at all. And his dad, who is a well-meaning dad, just trying to show him, show him the ropes, is all like, yeah, kill him, son. It gets easier with everyone you do, and Spike does not bite. So seeing them continue up and build off that in this movie, Kelson sort of is placed front and center to sort of serve as that another bridge from the old world. I remember how things were. The foundations were unshakable. To, oh my God, I've experienced the zombie apocalypse. I've given it meaning in the best way I know how, which is preserving and commemorating the dead. And then sort of like planting the seeds for the future that we see with Spike at the end of the movie that we just talked about. We don't know where the third movie is going to go, but I do want to delve into that a little bit because I do think there's a clear through line in terms of the outlook, the filmmakers, especially Garland being the scriptwriter for all three. How does Kelson's outlook on this situation or philosophy sort of, I think, sort of cement the underlying thesis of the trilogy that we've seen so far? Big question. I don't know. Who wants to tackle that one first?
Well, it kind of feels like Kelson is just like he understands and has been working towards, or even, and as you mentioned, he does have faith. It's just he's recontextualized what that means, for people. But like you said, but his faith is in humanity, and that we can continue to restore humanity by showing humanity to others, and including these zombie figures. And I felt like, in context, until he finally comes upon this idea that there may be a cure to this, and we may relieve these infected people of the agony that they're in. It's interesting. This film does something that Wolfman didn't do that we were really excited for it to possibly kind of teeter into, was getting the perspective of the infected, and seeing like what that is and that transitional period. And we get a couple glimmers of that here, and at least a dialogue about maybe what you're chasing isn't what we think. We think you're coming after us, but they actually see mania, and they're trying to like rid it of in some type of way. And it gives them a reprieve for that brief moment when they're under these, I guess it's forms of drugs, like that he's on. But what I found interesting about that whole dynamic, though, is that it kind of makes the zombies like kind of more as metaphors as well, as the kind of misunderstood other in many ways, and how we can coexist with things we may not understand, and maybe there's more to this than meets the eye, and that was not somewhere I thought this franchise was going to go. I never thought we were going to be sympathizing with the zombies, and I found that also very fascinating, and you would not have predicted that when thinking about in context with the original movie, that we would ever come to a place where we would be having a dialogue about the psychology of the zombie. I found that very fascinating. So,
yeah, because we've always simplified it. I think we might have talked about this on the last podcast, but like, I really feel like in a lot of ways, this is Boyle, well, I guess in this case, Garland, more specifically building off the ideas from the last film, is like it's a referendum on the survivalism. And, was the survivalism that was sort of like baked into the genre up and, for the large part of the zombie movie history, has that actually created more divisiveness than it's than it deserved. You know what I mean? Like, instead of trying to build bridges, it's actually divided us by creating an us versus them. And this movie, I think, Ron, kind of a thing that I really love about it is it says, but like, what about them? Like, what's going on over there? Should we like try to learn about them before we just start killing them? Are they really lost? Are they really dead? Or should we not afford them the opportunity for a conversation, at least to try to learn and get inside their head, which I thought was really powerful. Adam, what did you kind of make of this approach in terms of like Kelson's outlook on the world?
Yeah, I'm glad Laurent started it off because I didn't want my cynicism to get in the way. But the way that you've touched upon it is exactly what I think. Again, it it is my cynicism with the world, but I think times are so different from when 28 Days was made to 28 years that as a society, people do just they are afraid of what's not the norm to them, or they see someone as different and they judge them immediately. And I do think, from my personal point of view, that is what's being captured here, especially in this movie, is that just because something or someone is different doesn't mean that they are necessarily this thing that needs to be feared. And I think the way that Dr. Kelson Sampson's story starts to evolve, and you can see the light sort of come into the eyes of Sampson as we're getting more towards finding a cure. It's the first time where like humanity and a zombie, I think, has ever sat down facing one another and tried to understand each other. And I think the very like end scene where Sampson's carrying Dr. Kelson and thanks him was just so perfectly done,
Yeah.
because it was like, it isn't just Dr. Kelson understanding Samson. Samson has grown to understand Dr. Kelson.
Yeah.
And like what Laurent said, there is only one prominent scene, and it only lasts like 10 seconds, where we do get to see what the zombies see, but that's all it needed. It gave so much context as to why they act the way that they act, and the fact that it's not like they want to be targeting people. It's this mania, whatever it may be, and I'm sure it will be built upon in the third movie. But when Samson was cured and he finally got his memories back, we got to see the first glimpse for a long time, since 28 Days, of how like this actually started. And
Yeah.
and I think it was just so well done. But ultimately, I think the point is that you shouldn't just necessarily be fearing something that's different.
Yeah.
Just because something is different, it isn't this big scary nature. And I think it's something that people watching can pick up upon and learn from, and hopefully integrate into their own lives.
And the performance too from Samson is just really top tier.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Like it was crazy. It was good in the last one, but of course it was a little more one note. But here we get layers, and I found that very interesting. And that flashback sequence on the train is like top tier filmmaking for me, especially when we come back into reality and they're all like zombie formed after we've just seen all these people on the train. He says that one line, I can't remember what it is. Something
I don't have a ticket.
I don't have a
I
ticket.
don't have a ticket. That was just so good. Like the way that those scenes were interwoven were so powerful. And I thought, for a mostly silent performance, very, very effective, full character arc there from him. So
yeah, really can't wait to see where they take it in the next one. Before we kind of move on to the wrap up here, Jada, what did you sort of make of the Kelson's worldview, point of view, and how this is kind of informing where they're taking this series at large?
Yeah, first of all, just want to say, I think his name is Lewis Perry, the actor that plays Samson. Absolutely fantastic. He's so good, balances out Ray Fiennes' performance on screen very well, even if he's not given a lot of dialogue. I feel like Kelson's sort of thought process in terms of everything that we've seen so far in these films is really about just life being sacred. Just because, I feel like even me as an audience member, I went into this film being like, well, the people infected with the rage virus, they're not people. So like, it doesn't really matter if they're dead, or if someone kills them, or, yada, yada, yada. But I left this movie really questioning that, saying like, no, they're going through a sort of mental psychosis. Like they're seeing a distorted perception of reality, and they're trapped in that perception. And so I feel like seeing that Dr. Kelson is giving, who's probably perceived as one of the scariest in Alpha, some sort of compassion, and is, establishing a relationship with with an infected that way is really a testament to Dr. Kelson's character, in that despite any fears that he may has, he still persists and still, demands to treat Samson as an equal of sorts, or as someone to sit and have a conversation with, rather than you're the enemy, I'm going to attack you, or I'm going to ignore you, or I'm going to, berate you, or something like that. I feel like that's definitely something that we need to see in the world nowadays, where, just because someone looks like something on the surface, you really don't know what's going on the inside. And I feel like that's something we still need to figure out as a society. Mental health isn't really still all that taken all that seriously. Um, and I feel like this kind of ties into that sort of general perception of, you know, if there's something wrong with you, or if you're quote unquote broken, or if you have, a disorder or mental illness or something, you're seen as less than, or you're seen not as human as someone who may present to be perfectly physically and mentally intact.
Like Jimmy.
Like Jimmy, like
Yes,
Jimmy.
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. I just feel like I don't know, it just kind of moved me a bit, where I was like, "Oh," because I didn't realize in myself that I was like, "Oh, no, I have these biases against what I thought they were," and then seeing a little bit more into it. Again, it's Nia DaCosta with connections. She's
Yeah.
making you connect to the perceived villains of this world, and then saying, "No, in actuality, it's Jimmy. It's this guy. He's the one you need to watch out for."
Yeah.
I
And
don't know. That was
she in many ways is Dr. Kelson. It feels like her philosophy is his,
yeah,
and the way she's kind of
100%.
reverse engineering every character, including the zombies here, to get to the core of why they are the way that they are, allows us to relate to them in different ways. As you said, we even have a little bit of sympathy for Jimmy towards the end.
I was gonna say they give Jimmy. I mean, he's also a victim of circumstances.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
for sure.
And another quick thing, just specifically because I'd noticed I'd watched all 3 films before coming in to see The Bone Temple, but I noticed that the women in the previous films weren't really given too much agency. I love Naomi Harris in the first one. She's fantastic, but they don't really do a lot with her. And then 28 Weeks, that's a whole other,
Yeah,
again, typical studio action film. But I feel like, and even 28 Years, again, Jodie Comer was kind of written into a corner, but she somehow managed to bloom and blossom out of that. And I feel like specifically with Erin Kellyman, um, she is kind of a focal point for a point of rest or somewhat perceived safety for Spike, which is really wonderful. She's, immediately comes to Spike whenever she's like, I feel like Jimmy's full of shit. He doesn't really know old Nick, things like that. I
Mhm.
feel like the treatment of Erin
yeah,
Kellyman in this film, despite again not being written to be very complex or very like more than just a regular supporting character that's there to be in the background while the men fight in the front or the men talk. I feel like Erin was given a lot of leeway in the way that she portrayed Jimmy Inc., which I feel like I really loved, and is I feel like definitely something you can see with a female director in this.
Mhm.
So
Definitely. Alex Garland writing women, not his strong suit. But we've gotten a couple of really talented directors and exceptional actresses, and especially Nia DaCosta directing this film with the sexual actress, I think is able to highlight what could have been a throwaway character, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think, I think it ties nicely into where we're going with the future of the trilogy, talking about the sort of compassion is the hope for a better future built off of the survivalism that's sort of in a lot of ways exploded. Even like thinking about like the Nazi zombie thing, right? Call of Duty, Nazi zombies. The two most, we boil it down to, they're the worst form of human ever, which is Nazis. Massive oversimplification, but whatever. But like seriously, like in terms of how we think about well, they're evil because they were Nazis and they're zombies, so they're undead. So really, we shouldn't feel any form of remorse whatsoever for just murdering hundreds of these people, essentially. And I think that this movie is really putting us, the audience, to the task to think differently about that moving forward. And I think this is really underscored by the final scene of the movie, in which, spoiler alert, Cillian Murphy comes back for this last scene to sort of set up the bridge to the third and final film. And I thought it was a really beautiful moment because I really need to go back and rewatch Bone Temple, because there was the whole history lesson thing they were talking about, and I was like, okay, I know there's something important in that little tidbit that I didn't properly take in. I need to see it again. But the more like the sticking point for me was his daughter says, "Hey, they need help. Should we help them?" And his response is, "Of course we will." And then we cut. And I think for me, I'm watching that and it signals that, like, I really do think that, like, Garland and co are trying to say, if we are going to find a path out of the bleak zombie apocalypse, it can only be built out of empathy and compassion and reaching a hand out to people, even maybe people we don't know, or maybe even people who don't deserve it. Which, it's a tall task in 2026. What did you guys think of this final scene? And actually, Jade, I'll throw it back to you first.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Cillian Murphy. Are you kidding me? Academy Award winner, Cillian Murphy. I love that guy. I feel like it's great to see Jim back on our screens after, oh my goodness, was it 22, 23 years?
24.
24 years. Wow. Okay. Yeah, no, that's great. I feel like there's still a lot of essences of who Jim was in the original film that still kind of pop out, because I'm pretty sure the discussion that he has with his daughter is over, like, history in relation to philosophy and why certain leaders led a certain way and why certain actions were taken at a certain point. Again, I'll have to watch it again too. But the fact that he's taking the time to educate his daughter on things like that in a landscape full of people and infected who could want to come and attack them and kill them at any time is still showing exactly how core how core of a value that intelligence and will and empathy and compassion are to Jim after all these years. Because I mean, I feel like anyone would turn, not to be cheesy, to the dark side or to the path of evil, or to be complacent or not care after the events of 28 days. But it's just really nice to see good, happy, and a happier ending progression for them. So
And also the respect for history too. He's taking time to teach his daughter history amidst a zombie apocalypse. He's living in the ruins of the UK and he's still teaching history, which shows
who don't
that
know history are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah. Adam, what did you make of the final scene?
Yeah, I'll echo that. The fact that he's taken the time to teach his daughter where humans have come from, what they've gone through, how we've got to this point in time is such a pertinent thing to do, for not just in this scheme of like a zombie apocalypse, but just in general. Like, this is stuff that we should be teaching ourselves. Look back on where we've come from, look at where we are now, and how do we go forward from this. But I think I think it's directed really well, because it feels like a passing of the torch, where it's like Nia DaCosta's picked up the baton, she's taken it, she's ran with it, and now she's like, here you go, Danny Boyle. I think it's set up to be a much more emotional film, like 28 years later was. So it feels fitting that it's now getting passed back for Danny Boyle and Alex Garland to come together and complete the trilogy. But it also just shows that even in the midst of a panic, that the humanity inside of Jim's character and what he's obviously taught his daughter comes to the forefront, because they could have quite easily turned their back and been like, not our problem. But not for a single second was that even on the table, and they're willing to put themselves at risk to aid strangers that they've never seen before. And just one gunshot will turn the entire hill of zombies their way. But he's willing to put his daughter at harm's risk in order to save people that he's never seen. I think that's such a pertinent lesson for people, again, to just bask in when they leave the cinema. And because that is the final sequence, that is probably the most emotional that the film gets in terms of and philosophical the philosophical nature of it finally comes to the forefront in that final scene where it does weigh heavy on your shoulders. And I know I walked out thinking, what would I do in that situation? And looking at myself internally to see if I would have it in me to be what I should be as a human, and that's just to be compassionate for one another. And I think it's just captured brilliantly, even though it is just like a 30-second end sequence.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Really leaves you with like a strong sense of, man, this movie is holding me to task. Like I need to focus. I need to be Jim in this situation. Right.
Yeah.
Laurent, how did you read this final scene?
I love that read, Adam. I think that that's also what I think a lot of us are saying right now is like, how important community is right now, how we have to lean on our communities right now, have to take care of each other, because if these structural forces no longer serve us, then we're all we have left, and to chart a new path forward, if we're going to survive this thing. And in this context, it being a virus. And so I love that emphasis on how we have to help these people, is seen as very like matter of fact for him. And the foundations have been set, the ideals have been set through Dr. Kelson now, as seen now through Spike, about to merge forces now with the character that from the original that I think is really going to bring this entire franchise to a really, hopefully a very satisfying, like nice buttoned up kind of ending where we're bringing we're bridging the gap between that first movie and this one, in a meaningful way now with all these new ideas that have been introduced with the sequels. So yeah, I think I look at it as what moving forward, what we're probably hopefully going to see is, seeing these little kernels of communities or pockets of humans who have survived in the midst of all of this, banding together to try and forge a way forward, hopefully a more humane society being created out of it, where the zombies, may be cured and we may restore humanity. It may never look the same way as it did before, but it'll at least have some semblance of what was normal at one point in time. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to how they synthesize all these ideas. They've done a great job of it so far. And it does seem like that's kind of the direction that we're leading towards, which is interesting because that's not where I would have thought we would have gone before 28 years later, so.
Well, when they announced the new trilogy, this was certainly not the angle I expected to see. And, unfortunately, due to the state of the world, this message feels like it's more pressing than even when they wrote it, honestly. And I'm with you, Laurent. I can't wait to see how they bring it home. I'm optimistic. It's a tall task, though, to like bring all these ideas together in a really impactful bow that has something meaningful to say that also feels like narratively satisfying.
Sure.
I can't wait. I have the utmost faith in Garland and Boyle in this case. I think they've done nothing but like blow me away with any of these movies. I guess, Lauren, just the last thing I would say, like just to sort of build off of what you were saying, the community, it being a really big, really, really big takeaway. I think that my personal challenge, even watching this movie, is I have to learn how to give people, even people who I might not think I deserve grace. I also need to be mindful of bad actors. There are the Jimmies out there who are actually trying to wreak havoc and hurt people. But that does not mean that everyone who looks different is a Jimmy. So it's a tall task. I need to provide empathy and compassion to the people who are different, while also being mindful that there are people who are, I keep calling them bad actors, but people who are performative. They're not looking out for you.
Yeah.
They're not only looking out for themselves, they want to hurt you. And I think that is a thing I really hope they kind of follow through with on the next film as well. How do you sort of like sift through the differences? And that's sort of where Murphy's at here. How do I know? Well, I'm going to start from a place of of course, they need help. What kind of people are they? We'll find out, and we'll see what that leads to in the conclusion. So, those are our overall thoughts on the Bone Temple, ladies and gentlemen. This movie is not making enough money at the box office. Please go see it. Please go see it. Pay the money. It's absolutely worth the trip. Guys, I slipped up. I skipped over alternate media recommendations. So we're going to bring this late in the game to end the show. If people enjoyed The Bone Temple, what else would you recommend people watch alongside this movie? And I'll throw it to you first, LaRon Chapman.
I'm going to recommend 2 films. One of them is Children of Men, Alfonso Cuarón's Children of Men, and also The Road, the Cormac McCarthy adaptation with Viggo Mortensen and Charlize Theron. 2 post-apocalyptic movies that also not necessarily dealing with zombies, but dealing with the barbarism and nihilism of humanity, but the protagonist being the antithesis of that and forging, again, a positive way forward out of the darkness. And 2 movies I think are both very harrowing and kind of thematically work really well with this franchise, at least where it's gone recently. So,
The Road. That is an intense watch, ladies and gentlemen. Buckle up for that one. Adam Courtliff.
I've stuck to a nice, simple zombie movie and gone with Train to Busan. I think
Nice.
over the past few years, I myself will hold my hands up, and I've neglected foreign cinema, but I've tried to rectify that in the past few years. So I think, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the best foreign language zombie movie of all time, probably.
It's definitely in the conversation. I'd have to really sit down and think about it, but it is absolutely top 5, if not number 1, like definitely in the conversation. Zero doubt. Train to Busan, ladies and gentlemen. Check that out. Unfortunately, the sequel was not as good. The original masterpiece.
yes.
Jada Merritt, what would you recommend to people who enjoy The Bone Temple?
Fun fact, Train to Busan is in my top 4 on Letterboxd. But that is not one of my picks. I actually did a video game and then 2 movies. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about The Last of Us. The Last of Us is developed by Naughty Dog. They've been around for a while. It's probably one of the best player video games of all time. It is also about an infection through cordyceps, the fungus, but it's very people focused. I feel like people love playing that game and watching people play that game because of the character work that they do with Joel and Ellie and everyone that they encounter. It's just almost singular in how emotional and how pulling it is. And then for the films, I went with a more thematic approach. I actually chose Scott Beck and Brian Wood's Heretic. Just because of the themes of faith and fear and understanding your place in the universe and sort of just the philosophical discussions that happen in that. And then another film that I chose is Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene.
Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know, that is Elizabeth Olsen's debut film. She plays a woman who escapes a cult in her early 20s and then is subsequently trying to adjust to society. So I thought that the play on, sort of figuring out a woman's mental process as she's trying to join a completely different lifestyle after dealing with abuse and trauma her whole life was something that I feel like is kind of closely tied into this film. So
Yeah. Man, great recommends. I'm going to go with a couple of movies. Number 1, if you really are wanting to dig into the cult component here, and they're really big on true crime podcasts, so I'm sure that listeners or viewers are very familiar with cults, but an underseen movie about cults from Ty West, The Sacrament, really harrowing's a good word, LaRon. It is a very intense, upsetting watch at sort of how these cult of personality can really use and abuse the people who follow them blindly. If you want to see kind of the downside of that. On a much lighter note, if you want to explore sort of the ideas of belief, faith, organized religion, and how those intersect. Also a British production, The Life of Brian, I think has a lot to say about those things. It's not necessarily agree or disagree, but in fact, there was a lot of times when I was watching sort of the theatrics that Kelson was putting up, in a lot of ways, it felt like it was poking fun at sort of the narratives that we know through like Christianity. And I think The Life of Brian does so in a much less bleak way, but I think there's a lot of sense of humor about that as well. So check those films out. Well, guys, this has been such a great conversation. Really appreciate each one of you taking time to review 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple with us. Adam Courtliff, where can people find you and your work online if they want to see what else you're working on?
Yeah, so predominantly Adam Reviews Film on TikTok. I upload there every day. And then for more long form movie reviews, because I have no life and I watch pretty much everything that comes off at the cinema, adamreviewsfilm.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, check it out there. Jada Merritt, where can people find you online?
Oh, well, if you want to go to Instagram, you can find me at j.merritt. That's MERRITTT with 3 T's. Or you can find me on Letterboxd, Jada Merritt, JNMERRI. I post stuff every once in a while.
You gotta get. Wait, you should give her some credit. You've got some good Letterboxd reviews. I've seen them.
Thank you.
LaRon Chapman, where can people keep up with you and your work?
They can follow my reviews on Letterboxd at black_Senna_man, or they can follow us from our episodes, or here at thecinematropolis.com, as well as my film column, Real Insights, REEL, with LaRon Chapman at thecinematropolis.com for written reviews.
Excellent. And of course, you can find me everything at the Cinematropolis. Please do, if you want to support the show right now, or me, any of the people, go to the Cinematropolis YouTube, give us a subscribe, like this video in particular, would be really helpful. Again, we're pushing more into YouTube. We'll always be a podcast, but now we're trying to add the YouTube on top of it. So check us out, the Cinematropolis on YouTube. But of course, all of the work, including the written work that LaRon just mentioned, is over at thecinematropolis.com. I'm also on all the social media channels at C Masters Talk. That's letter C, Masters Talk. Thanks so much for watching and tuning in, everyone. We'll be back with a roundtable review. Next one, Scream 7. It's going to be a big one. Again, that is going to be Wednesday, March 4th. Until then, subscribe to all the channels and get some one-off reviews from LaRon and I. We'll catch you again next time.